a tale of two Russias, setting the stage for revolution. Russia in 1917 was a land of stark contrasts. The Tsar lived in unimaginable luxury, far removed from the harsh realities of everyday Russian life. Meanwhile, the vast majority of Russians suffered greatly. Peasants toiled in fields from dawn to dusk, living in small, cramped huts. In the cities, factory workers endured long hours and dangerous conditions. The gap between rich and poor was enormous, breeding resentment and anger. The common people felt ignored and oppressed, yearning for change. The Tsar seemed oblivious to their suffering, ruling as an absolute monarch. But beneath the surface, revolutionary ideas were spreading. Workers and peasants began to dream of a different Russia. The stage was set for a momentous upheaval. Decades of discontent were about to boil over. The year 1917 would see not one, but two revolutions rock Russia to its core. The February Revolution began with bread. On February 23, 1917, women in Petrograd took to the streets. Their cries resonated, and soon thousands joined. The Tsar's forces tried to maintain order, but the protests grew. Soldiers hesitated to fire. Some even joined the protesters. Isolated and powerless, the Tsar abdicated. On March 2, 1917, Tsar Nicholas II stepped down. The people celebrated, believing a new era had dawned. Lenin's grand entrance, the October Revolution, unfolds. While the provisional government struggled to rule, the Petrograd Soviet gained influence. It issued Order No. 1, giving it control over the military. Into this chaotic situation stepped Vladimir Lenin, returning to Russia in April 1917. Lenin rallied his Bolshevik party with a simple slogan: peace, land, and bread. The Bolsheviks promised to end the war and give land to the peasants. Throughout the summer and fall, tensions rose as the provisional government seemed weak and indecisive. Food shortages worsened, and the Bolsheviks gained more support. On October 25th, the Bolsheviks made their move. Red Guards and revolutionary soldiers stormed the Winter Palace, the seat of the provisional government. The takeover was swift and nearly bloodless, with ministers arrested. Lenin announced the formation of a new government, and the Bolsheviks were now in control. The October Revolution had succeeded, but the fighting was far from over. Red versus white, the Russian Civil War erupts. The Bolshevik takeover was not universally accepted, and many Russians opposed their radical policies. A loose coalition formed to fight the new regime, calling themselves the White Army. The Bolsheviks organized the Red Army to defend their revolution, and a brutal civil war began. The fighting raged across Russia's vast territory, marked by extreme violence. Both sides committed atrocities, and millions died from combat, disease, and famine. The Red Army, led by Leon Trotsky, proved more effective, fighting for a clear cause. The Whites were divided and lacked a common goal. Slowly, the Reds gained the upper hand. By 1920, the Bolsheviks had largely defeated their opponents. The last white forces were driven out of Crimea in 1921. The Red victory came at a terrible cost, with Russia in ruins and its economy collapsed. Millions were dead or displaced, but the Bolsheviks had secured their power. They began the task of building a new Soviet state. The Civil War's end marked the beginning of a new era for Russia. A new order emerges, the birth of Soviet Russia. With the Civil War won, the Bolsheviks faced the challenge of rebuilding a shattered country. Lenin introduced the new economic policy, NEP, in 1921, allowing some private enterprise. This temporary retreat from pure communism helped revive the economy. In 1922, they formed the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, uniting Russia with other former imperial territories. The Communist Party held absolute power, and other parties were banned. Soviet society underwent dramatic changes, with the state taking control of industry and agriculture. Ambitious programs to modernize the country were launched, and education was expanded. Literacy rates soared, and women gained new rights and opportunities. The Orthodox Church lost its privileged position, and atheism became the official state policy. However, the new regime was also repressive. The secret police targeted enemies of the revolution, with many arrested, exiled, or executed. Freedom of speech was severely limited, and the press came under strict control. The Soviet Union was becoming a totalitarian state. The ideals of the revolution were being twisted into a harsh new reality. Global tremors, the revolution's international impact. The Russian Revolution sent shockwaves around the world, inspiring revolutionaries in other countries. Communist parties sprang up across Europe and beyond, with many seeing the Soviet Union as a model to emulate. The revolution changed the balance of power in Europe, with Russia withdrawing from World War I. After the war, the Soviet Union was isolated diplomatically, with many countries refusing to recognize it. The Comintern, or Communist International, was founded in 1919 to spread revolution worldwide. Soviet agents supported communist movements in other countries, alarming Western governments. The revolution also influenced anti-colonial movements, with many in Asia and Africa seeing it as an example of throwing off oppression. The Soviet Union supported independence struggles, putting it at odds with colonial powers. The revolution played a role in reshaping the global order. Its effects would be felt throughout the 20th century and beyond. The revolution's ideas still resonate globally, with Marxism remaining influential in academic and political circles. The concept of socialist revolution continues to inspire some movements. The Russian Revolution's legacy is complex and contradictory, much like the revolution itself. Ideological shifts from Marxism to Leninism. The Russian Revolution marked a significant evolution in communist ideology. Karl Marx had predicted revolution in advanced capitalist countries, but Russia was largely agrarian and underdeveloped. Lenin adapted Marxist ideas to fit Russian conditions, creating Marxism-Leninism. Lenin argued that a small, disciplined party could lead the revolution, guiding the masses. This contrasted with Marx's vision of spontaneous working-class action. Lenin also emphasized the need for a strong state to defend the revolution. These ideas justified one-party rule in the Soviet Union and shaped communist movements worldwide. Lenin's death in 1924 sparked new ideological debates. Joseph Stalin promoted the idea of socialism in one country, focusing on building up the Soviet Union. This contrasted with Trotsky's call for permanent world revolution. Stalin's view prevailed, shaping Soviet policy for decades to come. The Russian Revolution not only changed Russia, but also transformed communist ideology. Its impact on global politics and ideology was profound and lasting. The human cost lives transformed by revolution. The Russian Revolution upended millions of lives. Workers gained better conditions and peasants received land. But the revolution also brought great suffering. The Civil War was devastating, with millions dying from violence, disease, and famine. Many fled into exile, while others faced persecution or execution. The revolution was a profound upheaval in the lives of ordinary people. Cultural revolution, art and literature in a new era. The Russian Revolution unleashed a wave of creativity, with artists and writers embracing the revolutionary spirit. The early Soviet period saw an explosion of avant-garde art, with constructivism merging art with social purpose. In literature, poets like Vladimir Mayakovsky celebrated the revolution, experimenting with language and form. Novelists like Isaac Babel chronicled the tumultuous times, and the theater thrived under innovators like Vsevolod Meyerhold. Film directors like Sergei Eisenstein pioneered new techniques, creating classics of world cinema. However, this cultural flowering was short-lived. By the late 1920s, the state began to assert more control, promoting socialist realism as the official artistic style. Many avant-garde artists fell out of favor, with some persecuted or silenced. Despite these constraints, Soviet culture continued to produce significant works. Authors like Mikhail Sholokhov wrote powerful novels about the revolution and its aftermath. Composers like Dmitry Shostakovich created music that subtly commented on Soviet life. The revolution's impact on Russian culture was complex and long-lasting. Legacy of 1917. Echoes of revolution in modern times. The Russian Revolution's legacy extends far beyond 1917, shaping much of the 20th century. The Soviet Union became a superpower, standing as an alternative to Western capitalism. This led to the Cold War, which dominated global politics for decades. The revolution inspired other communist revolutions in China, Cuba, and Vietnam. Even after the Soviet Union's collapse in 1991, the revolution's effects linger. Modern Russia still grapples with its communist past, with some looking back on the Soviet era with nostalgia, and others seeing it as a dark period best forgotten. The debate over the revolution's meaning continues, remaining a contentious topic in Russian politics and society. Globally, the revolution's ideas still resonate, with Marxism remaining influential in academic and political circles. The concept of socialist revolution continues to inspire some movements. The Soviet experience serves as a cautionary tale, showing the dangers of totalitarianism and the gap between revolutionary ideals and reality. The Russian Revolution's legacy is complex and contradictory, much like the revolution itself.